the secret rules of royal wealth. Before the world saw their gold, their palaces, or their impossible luxuries, there were rules, unwritten, unspoken, and known only to those born within the rarest circles of power. Rules that shaped every decision, every alliance, every rise and every fall. And for one young Sheikh, understanding these rules would become the defining challenge of his life. To understand why these rules matter today, we must look beyond the glittering image of modern royalty. Wealth on this scale isn't simply inherited. It is managed, protected, and strategically deployed across generations. Dynasties do not survive on resources alone. They survive through discipline, caution, and codes of behavior carved from centuries of triumph and betrayal. He first encountered these rules not through lectures or documents, but through observation. As a child, he watched elders conduct themselves with extraordinary restraint. Their power was vast, yet their movements were precise. Their decisions were deliberate, and their silence, especially their silence, carried more force than public declarations ever could. But it wasn't until adolescence that he realized these rules were less about wealth and more about survival. A misstep in judgment could cost influence. A careless alliance could weaken a family's standing. And generosity, though celebrated, had to be measured with care. Too much revealed vulnerability. Too little revealed arrogance. The first test came when he was invited to a gathering traditionally reserved for experienced members of a ruling circle. He expected grand discussions, dramatic negotiations, or fierce debates. Instead, he found something far more unsettling. Decisions made through subtle glances, unfinished sentences, and pauses laden with meaning. Nothing was said plainly. Everything was said quietly. He left that room with a single question echoing in his mind. How does one master rules built not on clarity, but on nuance? That question became the foundation of his journey, one that would lead him into the deeper layers of power, where wealth alone meant nothing unless guided by wisdom invisible to the public eye. He began studying the elders more closely, searching for patterns beneath their calm exterior. Over time, he noticed how influence did not move in straight lines. It shifted quietly, like wind through desert dunes, subtle, deliberate, and often unnoticed unless you knew where to look. A single nod could signal agreement. A brief silence could signal disapproval. And a question, asked at the right moment, could alter the direction of an entire negotiation without ever sounding forceful. Yet the deeper he observed, the more he realized the rules he thought he understood were only the surface. Royal wealth operated on principles far removed from the world's assumptions. Power was not displayed, it was withheld. Resources were not flaunted, they were positioned. And connections were not acquired. They were cultivated with the patience of someone planting seeds meant to bloom decades later. His confusion grew when he noticed a contradiction he couldn't ignore. Those of the most authority rarely spoke with certainty. Instead, they asked questions designed to reveal someone else's intentions. It was a way of navigating risk without exposing one's own stance too early. To him, it felt like walking through fog with no map. Every misstep could shift alliances, trigger resentment, or unintentionally elevate the wrong people. The young Sheikh's first real challenge emerged during a high-level discussion about a charitable initiative. What seemed to be a simple proposal quickly transformed into a complex negotiation woven with history, obligation, and subtle rivalries. As he presented his perspective, he noticed an elder watching him closely, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Later, the man approached him privately and offered a lesson he would never forget. He explained that wealth in their world was like water in the desert. It flowed carefully, silently, and always with purpose. Too fast, and it created chaos. Too slow, and it invited misinterpretation. The true test was learning when to let it move and when to let it wait. Armed with this insight, the Sheikh revisited every decision he had made so far. And the more he reflected, the more he realized how many dangers were hidden beneath well-intentioned actions. A generous act could unintentionally empower a rival. A partnership could expose a family to unseen vulnerabilities. Even a kind gesture, if timed poorly, could signal weakness. As he internalized these lessons, a new tension began to form around him. His growing awareness made some advisors uneasy. His questions, once dismissed as youthful curiosity, now carried weight that others were not prepared to confront. And slowly, he sensed that understanding the rules was only the beginning. Surviving them, and eventually mastering them, would require navigating a conflict far more subtle than he had imagined. The conflict revealed itself gradually, like shadows lengthening across a quiet courtyard. At first, he simply sensed resistance. Brief pauses when he entered a room, hushed conversations that ended too quickly, advisors exchanging glances when he offered insight. Nothing overt, nothing dramatic, yet the pattern was unmistakable. His growing understanding of the secret rules unsettled those who once felt secure in his inexperience. He soon discovered that in circles of immense wealth, knowledge itself is power, and power, when redistributed, rarely goes unchallenged. One evening, during a gathering meant to review regional investments, he presented an analysis that exposed a potential financial vulnerability. It was not an accusation, merely an observation, but the reaction was sharp. A senior figure countered him with unusual force, insisting his concerns were exaggerated. Others followed, attempting to redirect the conversation, shielding one another with practiced unity. Yet their eagerness to dismiss him revealed more than they intended. He had stepped into territory guarded by pride and hidden interests. This was the unspoken reality of royal wealth. The rules that shaped it were not only cultural, they were protective barriers forged over decades. And anyone who learned them too quickly risked becoming a disruptor rather than an apprentice. Tension deepened when he received a discreet warning from someone he trusted. Not all wealth was clean. Not all influence was aligned with honor. Some decisions, made long before he was born, carried consequences that no one wished to revisit. His newfound clarity threatened to expose threads that powerful individuals preferred left untouched. Yet, he could not ignore what he had seen. The family's investments were being steered in ways that benefited a select few while presenting the illusion of collective gain. It wasn't corruption. It was manipulation wrapped in tradition. Clever enough to appear loyal. Subtle enough to appear wise. Dangerous enough to weaken the dynasty if left unchallenged. As he wrestled with the truth, the weight of legacy tightened around him. Speaking out could fracture alliances built over generations. Remaining silent could allow the dynasty's foundation to erode beneath the surface. Each option carried risk. Each path demanded sacrifice. He sought counsel from an elder known for both discretion and integrity. Their conversation, held at dusk on a quiet terrace, changed everything. The elder listened patiently and then delivered a single, piercing truth. Wealth survives on trust, but trust survives only on transparency. If he allowed hidden interests to shape their future, he would betray not only his ancestors, but every generation to come. The realization left him shaken. The conflict was no longer about strategy or etiquette. It was about protecting a legacy that existed long before him and would endure long after. And the choice he would make next would determine whether the dynasty's future rested on quiet compromise or courageous honesty. The moment to confront the shadows was nearing, and he knew there was no turning back. The confrontation unfolded in a chamber reserved for the most delicate matters, where reputations were shaped, preserved, or undone in silence. He entered with the composure of someone who understood the gravity of his choice. Around him sat the architects of the dynasty's wealth, men whose influence had guided national fortunes for decades. They expected hesitation. They expected deference. Instead, he brought truth. He spoke with clarity, laying out the patterns he had uncovered. Not accusations, but facts. Not emotion, but evidence. Every misaligned investment, every concealed interest, every decision that had quietly shifted the family's wealth away from transparency and toward private advantage. At first, the room resisted his words. Faces hardened. Some leaned back, arms crossed, preparing to dismiss him as naive. But then he revealed the final set of documents. Data they did not know he had accessed. Proof carved through every mask they wore. The chamber fell silent, the air heavy with a realization none could ignore. The dynasty's wealth had been drifting toward danger, not through malice, but through complacency disguised as tradition. And he was the only one who had dared to trace the fault line to its source. The climax arrived when he declared, without wavering, that the system would change. Oversight would be enforced. Investments restructured. Processes made transparent. not to punish, but to protect, not to weaken them, but to strengthen the foundation they all depended on. Some protested, clinging to the comfort of the old ways. Others remained stunned, recognizing the depth of his resolve. Yet what mattered most was a quiet nod from the elder who had advised him earlier, a silent affirmation that history would remember this moment as a turning point. In the days that followed, the dynasty shifted, slowly at first, then unmistakably. Reforms took shape, hidden tensions eased, and respect for the young Sheikh grew not because he challenged power, but because he restored its integrity. The secret rules of wealth had not vanished, but they were rewritten, guided now by honor rather than habit. He stood on a balcony overlooking the city one evening, watching lights shimmer across the skyline shaped by generations before him. For the first time, he felt the weight of legacy settle not as a burden, but as a purpose. He understood now that true wealth is not measured by what is kept, but by what is protected for those who will inherit the world long after the day's decisions fade. So, what do you think? Are we repeating the same mistake again?